May 15th, 1929, 11:30 a.m. In the heart of Cleveland, Ohio, hundreds of doctors, nurses, and patients fill the corridors of the Cleveland Clinic's outpatient building. It's the busiest hour of the busiest day of the week, a time when waiting rooms overflow with patients seeking revolutionary medical care. None of them realizes, in mere minutes, this beacon of healing will become a tomb of toxic gas. Deep in the building's basement, a disaster is silently unfolding. More than 2 tons of X-ray film, highly volatile nitrocellulose that burns even underwater, has begun to ignite. The fire is already releasing a lethal yellowish-brown gas, a substance so potent it will suffocate its victims within minutes. They will fall lifeless before they can even comprehend what's killing them. Like the dreaded mustard gas of World War I, this invisible killer shows no mercy. Within the next hour, 123 people will lose their lives in one of America's deadliest medical disasters. But in the darkness of this tragedy, extraordinary tales of heroism will emerge. A young police officer who charges into the gas-filled building 21 times, saving lives until the poison claims his own. A telephone operator who could have fled to safety, but chooses to remain at her post, desperately alerting others until her final breath. This is the story of the Cleveland Clinic disaster, a tale of death, courage, and lessons that would forever change the face of modern medicine. A stark reminder that sometimes the greatest advances in medical safety arise from our darkest hours. In the aftermath of World War I, as medicine stood on the brink of transformation, 4 physicians dared to reimagine healthcare. On February 28, 1921, they opened the doors to what would become one of America's most revolutionary medical institutions. The Cleveland Clinic represented a radical departure from the fragmented medical care of the era. For the first time, specialists who had traditionally worked in isolation would collaborate under one roof, sharing knowledge and resources in ways that would transform patient care forever. Their ambition quickly bore fruit. When insulin was discovered as a treatment for diabetes in 1921, the Cleveland Clinic became one of the first institutions to embrace this revolutionary therapy. Diabetic patients, who once faced certain death, now found hope within these walls. The clinic's cardiac department pushed even further, pioneering surgical techniques that would lay the groundwork for modern heart surgery. By 1929, what began as a single building had grown into a sprawling medical complex. The 4-story outpatient facility saw hundreds of patients daily, drawn from across the country by the promise of cutting-edge care. But beneath this temple of healing, a deadly secret was accumulating. In the basement storage room, more than 4,200 pounds of X-ray film lay carefully filed away. These weren't ordinary photographic films. They were made of nitrocellulose, the same highly unstable compound used in explosive gunpowder. When heated, this material would release phosgene and other lethal gases, the same devastating chemical weapons that had claimed thousands of lives in the trenches of World War I. That spring morning in 1929, as nurses prepared examination rooms and doctors reviewed patient charts, no one suspected that the very technologies enabling their medical miracles harbored such deadly potential. In the busy waiting areas, patients sat reading magazines, perhaps nervously anticipating their appointments, while beneath their feet, an invisible threat waited for a single spark to transform this sanctuary of healing into a chamber of horror. The morning began like any other for steamfitter Buffery Boggs. At 9 a.m., he discovered a leak in a high-pressure steam line, a routine repair in the clinic's basement, but this particular maintenance call would haunt him for the rest of his life. The leaking pipe ran through a dark, poorly ventilated storage room that housed the clinic's massive collection of X-ray films. Following standard procedure, Boggs began stripping away the pipe's insulation. The work was delicate, requiring precision in the dim light. As steam hissed through the leak, he made a fateful decision, one that seemed entirely sensible at the time. He left the building temporarily to shut off the steam supply, allowing the pipes to cool before completing the repair. In that moment of departure, he couldn't know he was giving disaster time to take root. Above, the clinic pulsed with life. Doctors consulted with patients about groundbreaking treatments. Nurses efficiently moved between examination rooms, their footsteps echoing through busy corridors. The waiting areas filled with hopeful patients, some having traveled hundreds of miles seeking the clinic's renowned care. Meanwhile, in the basement, an invisible enemy was stirring. When Boggs returned around 11 a.m., what he encountered would become the stuff of nightmares. A noxious cloud of yellowish-brown gas seeped from around the exposed pipe. He grabbed a fire extinguisher, but against the chemical fire beginning to spread through the X-ray films, it was like fighting an inferno with a water pistol. What made the situation truly terrifying was a cruel quirk of chemistry. Water wouldn't help. In fact, it would only make things worse. These films would continue burning, even submerged. The gas began its silent invasion of the building's circulatory system. Like a patient with a spreading infection, the clinic's own infrastructure became its enemy. The pipe chases connecting to the mechanical room became deadly conduits. Ventilation ducts designed to bring fresh air instead carried poison. On the third floor, a simple footlatch holding open a stair door would prove tragically significant, creating a perfect pathway for the toxic fumes to concentrate. At exactly 11:30 a.m., the situation exploded. Literally. The first blast rocked the building's foundation, powerful enough to throw Boggs and his assistant through a basement window. Their violent ejection would ironically save their lives. But the explosion had an even more sinister effect. It forced the accumulated gas upward through every available opening, transforming the building's entire ventilation system into a delivery mechanism for mass death. At 11:35 a.m., the building seemed to take a breath and then explode. The second blast, more devastating than the first, shattered the clinic's massive skylight, sending a deadly rain of glass cascading into the main waiting room. The explosion created a cruel paradox. While it spread poisonous gas to every corner of the building, the shattered skylight offered the only means for the toxic fumes to escape. Time seemed to stop throughout the building, leaving a series of haunting tableaus. In one examination room, surgical instruments lay carefully arranged, waiting for procedures that would never begin. A stenographer's half-finished letter sat in her typewriter, its final words trailing off mid-sentence. In the X-ray developing room, a roll of film hung forgotten, still stretched out to dry. Silent testimony to lives interrupted in an instant. A wheelchair stood abandoned on a balcony overlooking the waiting room, its blanket thrown aside in desperate haste. The gas showed no mercy in its efficiency. A woman on the third floor smashed a window, preparing to jump as firefighters spread a life net below. But as she stood poised for escape, the poisonous vapor swirled around her shoulders and she collapsed inward beyond reach. Elizabeth Farmer Sexauer waited in one room while her sister underwent an examination in another. Her sister broke a window and jumped to safety, but Elizabeth was found hours later in the corridors, another victim of the lethal fumes. The horror extended beyond the building's walls. Pedestrians who rushed to help found themselves overcome by fumes while still a block away. Even the most hardened emergency responders, veterans of the Great War, had never seen anything like it. The gas was so potent that those who inhaled it often had no time to realize what was happening. Those who survived described the scene as something from their worst nightmares. People dropping unconscious mid-stride, their faces transforming within moments of exposure. As the first alarm reached the fire department, even hardened veterans of the Great War would find themselves unprepared for what awaited them. The building had become a gas chamber, with a cruel twist. The same medical technologies that had saved so many lives were about to claim them instead. And the worst was yet to come. In the midst of this catastrophe, police officer Ernest Staub emerged as an unlikely hero. Just 30 years old, with no protective equipment, he charged repeatedly into the gas-filled building. Each time he emerged carrying an unconscious victim, witnesses begged him to stop. "Gotta get them out. Gotta get them out," he replied, his voice growing hoarser with each rescue. One by one, he saved 21 lives. The gas would eventually overcome him, making the ultimate sacrifice in service to others. Throughout the building, ordinary people made extraordinary choices. Dr. Carl Hellwig, an intern from another hospital, rushed to clinic to help with resuscitation efforts, only to find his wife among the victims. She had gone to the clinic for a routine examination. She died as he worked frantically to save her. In another part of the building, telephone operator Gladys Gibson faced a crucial decision. A window near her switchboard offered an easy escape, but she chose to remain at her post. Until her final breath, she continued alerting others to the danger, saving countless lives through her sacrifice. Inside the neighboring hospitals, doctors confronted a medical crisis unlike anything they had seen before. The cruel nature of the poisoning meant that oxygen therapy, their primary weapon against the gas, often proved heartbreakingly inadequate. Some victims who initially survived would succumb days or even weeks later, their lungs irreparably damaged by the toxic cocktail they had inhaled. The Cleveland Clinic disaster became a catalyst for fundamental change in medical safety. Across America, hospitals radically transformed their approach to storing hazardous materials. The haunting lessons of that May morning led to the development of safer, non-flammable X-ray films. Fire departments began issuing gas masks as standard equipment. Each new safety protocol implemented carried the weight of those 123 lives lost, ensuring their deaths would prevent future catastrophes. Today, the original clinic building stands as Building T, its lobby housing a small memorial to that fateful day. But the true memorial extends far beyond those walls. The disaster reshaped medical safety across the nation. Every modern hospital's protocols bear silent witness to lessons learned that day, protecting countless lives through careful storage of hazardous materials and enhanced emergency responses. Today, the Cleveland Clinic serves patients from over 130 countries as one of the world's leading medical institutions. Its story reminds us that sometimes, the greatest medical advances emerge not from laboratories, but from moments of profound loss that inspire us to do better. From the ashes of disaster, a legacy of safety and innovation emerged, proving that even in our darkest moments, hope and progress can prevail. Thank you for watching. Please like and subscribe for more historical documentaries. See you in the next video.